Hi, I'm Kelly with Move Redmond, and we are here today doing candidate interviews. In case you didn't know, it's an election year, and Redmond City Mayor and City Council positions are up on the ballot. We will be interviewing candidates on the Rapid Ride B line, going from the Redmond Technology station down to the Bellevue Transit Center.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Angela Burney, and I'm running to be re-elected as mayor.
Hi there, my name's Jerry Anderson and I'm running for mayor of Redmond.
Hi there, my name is Usman Salahuddin. I am running for Redmond City Council Position 1.
Hi, my name is Angie Nueva Camina and I'm running for Redmond City Council.
Hi, I'm David Carson and I'm running for position number 7 for the Redmond City Council.
Hello, I'm Jessica Forsyth and I'm running for Redmond City Council, position 3.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Kritzer and I'm running for Redmond City Council, position 5.
What is your favorite way to get around?
Well, my very favorite way is just to walk because you can see so much more. But I unfortunately don't get to do that as much as I'd like to anymore because I'm so busy. So I'm looking forward to the train though when it starts. So I'm gonna hold out hope that will be my favorite way to get around in the future.
In general, my favorite way to get around is definitely riding a bus. And the reason is because I can listen to.
So my favorite way to get around is actually walking. I live in a pretty walkable area in Redmond, southeast Redmond, right next to Mayoral Park, and I love getting up in the morning, taking the trail, just going on a little walk there. There's grocery shopping, nice restaurants, coffee shop, and I really truly believe in the 15-minute neighborhood where I really want everything to be within this 15-minute zone across the city of Redmond, and so walking has definitely been something that I prioritize in my life.
Not because we're on a bus, but actually a bus. The reason why I like it is because it bookends my day. So instead of like just jumping in the car and having to be on and watching and being so aware of my surroundings and a responsible driver, I can just hop on the bus and it gives me that space as I'm on the way to the office or making that transition back home.
Well, it's by necessity usually my car, but I do like to go to Seattle on the bus. I take 545 into Seattle, and when I worked in Seattle, I religiously took the bus. And it sometimes was 545, but other routes as well.
Ooh, my bike. Honestly, I love just getting out and riding. I think we need safer ways to get out and be on the streets with cars. But yeah, just love being on my bike and getting around that way. Otherwise, I really enjoy walking as well.
My favorite way to get around, probably my favorite way is walking actually. I have 2 kids, so often you'll see me walking around with a stroller or wearing a hiking backpack with my 1-year-old there, or taking my daughter around with me in the neighborhoods.
Do you support the East Link starter line? Why or why not?
I absolutely do. In fact, we organized a letter from not just elected officials in the region, but also businesses and nonprofits to help it get started and get going sooner than later. Absolutely in favor of it. I think that it will provide a lot of opportunities to get started early, to help people get used to riding Link Light Rail on the early side, to alleviate some of the congestion that we have between Bellevue and Redmond, and really just to get the system up and running. We have some really beautiful features of it, and I think it's important to have those accessible from all of our community and not behind a fence for as soon as possible get those open.
Absolutely, I do support the East Side Starter Line, and the reason is because anything that adds transit and mobility and extra choices for folks to get to and from place A to B is a fantastic investment in infrastructure and mobility.
I absolutely support the East Link starter line. There are a lot of ways that we can get around, but especially when it comes to expediency, having something that can connect us straight with Bellevue, with Seattle, and with the rest of the region, it's really important for that line to be started now, so that the east side has this opportunity to travel, or the residents on the east side have the opportunity to travel along that corridor. I actually live in southeast Redmond, right next to the Southeast Redmond Light Rail Station, and I am very supportive of that opening up for my own personal reasons, but also knowing that my family in Redmond Ridge can take a bus, park at that transit center, and really just be able to go to Bellevue in with a snap of a finger.
I'm so excited for the East Link starter line. I live in downtown Redmond and I work in downtown Bellevue. So having that is going to make things a lot easier, but not only just for me, because but for the entire community. And I think when we create sense of ease and make things a little bit more simple, then we get to be more creative in other ways.
Oh, absolutely. Anything that gives us more mobility around our region, to me, is a good thing. I think if it's convenient, people will take it. And I think that's proven by what you see now with transit generally and light rail certainly. As it's gone to the U District, it's really been a beneficial thing to get people around the region without their car.
Very much, yes. I really am excited about the potential of the East Link starter line, because I think it will help folks understand how valuable the light rail is going to be, and it'll kind of be like a soft launch and a soft opening before the Seattle and that cross traffic happens. I know it was such a bummer to hear it get delayed, but I really think opening it up in this way is going to be such a cool opportunity for Eastsiders to really try it out.
I do. I think, everyone in our community is really excited about the arrival of East Link, and just when we look at the amount of people that commute between Redmond and Bellevue, I think even if we're not able to do the full connection all at once, but actually being able to go part way and have that connection between Redmond and Bellevue will do a lot of good towards taking cars off the road and giving people more transportation options.
80% of people currently get to the Line 1 light rail line by walking, biking, or the bus. How will you support sustainable transportation options to access light rail?
Yeah, so we're making a lot of investments in the city, not just on better walking and biking paths to all of the stations, but also other alternative forms of travel, like the Lime scooters. Lime has dropped in bikes now as well. But we're always looking for different opportunities to make sure people can access the stations, be it van pool or other investments in metro and sound transit routes to make sure people are getting out of their single occupancy vehicles and into the system itself. So we're always looking for ways to do that. We're also looking at ways to make sure we're investing in areas that aren't necessarily served as well. And so one of the big things that we're doing is investing in affordable housing and housing near the transit center. So in the future, that will really open up that opportunity for more and more people who really need to rely on the transit system outside of having their own car.
So I love sustainable transportation, and I'm a huge fan. With infrastructure funding for the city, that is one way we will invest in more pedestrian, bicycle, and transit infrastructure, such as stop improvements if we can, in partnership with Metro, in partnership with Sound Transit, and making sure that people have safe access to the facilities at all times.
I really believe that having a sustainable, option to get to light rail is critical, especially living, growing up in Redmond. I understood that transferring bus to bus was the way to get to the transit center, get to the next accessible bus stop. And so I really think we need to invest more in our shuttle system, where my parents live up on Novelty Hill. There's a bus that comes every hour and a half. That's not really sustainable for them to be able to get to the light rail station. So if there's a shuttle, working with Metro to create a Metro Flex option across our region and connect that, but also, looking at bus routes that are more accessible for when workers, when families, when seniors are going to be using them, because it's really important for us to take our entire communities in mind when we're looking at these routes, and creating that system of that last mile, where if we're cutting out how people get to the light rail, it's not really going to be sustainable if people actually using it. So I'm really invested in looking at options for that last mile opportunity to get folks to and from that the light rail.
I'm still learning as a new candidate. I'm still learning of all the ways that I am able to support it. So first and foremost is always just talking about it, having conversations about it, talking about the actual on-the-ground impact that this line has on people, and ways of getting there being always accessible, especially when we're talking about our community members with various abilities, and making sure that through our planning and also just maintenance, that everything, there are clear paths getting to it.
Well, so we've been talking on council for quite a while about how light rail in Redmond is going to change the dynamics. Right now, we have a lot of routes that are kind of circular routes, but they don't center on light rail. I think the best way we get people to added mobility without their car is for those routes to be centered on light rail. So circular routes that help them get from their neighborhood to light rail and beyond, and then obviously back home again.
Yeah, so this is a big one we talk about on council all the time. I really want to make sure that we're giving alternative modes to get there. So me, for instance, I live a little far to walk, so options like the Lime scooter are going to be really awesome for me, and we also have some Lime bikes that we're introducing as well. So I really want to make sure we're investing in those kinds of alternative mode options and safe ways to get there. So our plans to have safer bike routes and safer alternative ways to get around.
I'm currently actually a member of the Redmond City Council. I'm vice president, and one of my big initiatives has been around thinking about all the transportation options that we have in Redmond, especially because we're going to be getting 4 light rail stations in the next several years, and we really want to be able to make sure that people can use multimodal ways to get there. One of the big ways that I think we can do this is to make sure that it's safe to be able to get around. So one of the initiatives that I've helped to work on is to actually pass a resolution making our city a Vision Zero city, which is committed to reducing traffic related deaths and serious injuries to zero. And that means putting in safer bike and pedestrian infrastructure. That also means being able to use data to be able to figure out where are the places where we're seeing different issues coming up the most, and then making changes based on that.
Last year, the City Council passed a Vision Zero resolution. What role do you see the council having on implementation of Vision Zero? Vision Zero is a really important policy framework for ensuring that we are prioritizing safety in our streets. Vision Zero has the goal of reducing all serious injury and fatalities to zero. No one should die while trying to get around where they need to go. This is an important step in ensuring that in our planning process and in our budget, we are funding projects that improve the safety of our streets.
Well, it's really transforming the way that we're looking at our structures of our city. It puts a different focus on things. We had been a different kind of outlook, making sure that we were providing safe features, but now we're really intentionally looking for other opportunities for investment to make sure that people are staying safe, whether they're walking, on a bike, on a scooter, other modes of transportation, even in their cars. You're really realigning things so that it's less car-centric and more people-centric, to make sure that just safe all the way around. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunities there. We're also being able to get a lot more grants and different kinds of funding through the PSRC and other opportunities to make sure we can continue to make those investments. And then further, we're making sure that we're looking kind of outside the rail corridor area as well, trying to get investments from both state and federal entities to make sure that we're just really improving our overall transportation system for everybody.
That's a great question. So that was a policy that we passed when I was elected in 2017 to council starting in 2018. Vision Zero was a big deal. I'm really happy that that passed in the city, and I'm looking forward to, as mayor, implementing the Vision Zero program. That includes funding for a staff position for Vision Zero to implement that throughout our transportation network. It involves reprioritizing our capital improvements program so that pedestrian, bicycle, and transit infrastructure is at the top of the list in areas where there is the most need for that infrastructure. So that's a big deal, but it does take some time. On the awareness issue, on the awareness side, we've had a number of reports from residents that talk about safety in their own neighborhoods, and some things like outreach campaigns. We can put signage in. There is the 20 is Plenty campaign, just as an example, in Seattle. I would love to see that. I would love to see residential areas getting opportunities to have play spaces in their streets and opportunities for communities or littler neighborhoods within the city to come and talk to us about what they need to be enabled to access more sustainable transportation choices for themselves.
Vision Zero to me is incredibly critical, especially looking at how I would like to see the future of Redmond, where it's a lot more walkable, a lot more mobile in terms of having more folks on bicycles, having more folks have the opportunity to take our trails and use public transit every single day. So I really think we need to invest more into our infrastructure, looking specifically at protected bike lanes. So I live in Southeast Redmond, and that corridor right next to that light rail station just actually got a protected bike lane. I look around Redmond, the bicycle capital of the Northwest, and there's not a lot of protection for our folks riding bikes. There's also not a lot of sidewalks that are fully developed across the city. In my neighborhood alone, one of the sides of the street just doesn't have a sidewalk, so it's a little bit dangerous. I actually got connected with Move Redmond when we did a walk across Southeast Redmond, and I thought that was a great opportunity to explore our neighborhood. Thinking about Vision Zero, it's about the safety of our entire community. So we have to look at not just our folks that are on bikes or who can access public transit, but also looking at our neighborhoods. How are folks who might not have the ability to move around safely be able to do so? So looking at our disability community, working with our community partners and leaders to be able to have a solution for everyone.
I'm familiar with it because I do live in downtown Redmond, and on the corner of where I live, I've seen 3 pedestrians be struck by a vehicle where I've witnessed it happen. And getting to zero, I think that is going to take us a lot of work. So always taking a look and listening, engaging with our community members, asking about how are they feeling when they're walking around downtown? How are they feeling when they're walking in high density areas? But also, how are you feeling when you're crossing the street up on Education Hill? Because there's some blind spots up there. But that continuous engagement in community, because as council members, we can't be everywhere. However, the continual engagement with community.
Great.
Well, Vision Zero has a lot of pillars. It's centered around bicycle and pedestrian safety. So the more we can make roads multimodal, give people the sidewalk width that they need to pass each other. We have particular needs. I mean, I think every community has particular needs in terms of pedestrians, but we have residents who really like to get around with, for example, in their wheelchair, and so that does not happen by accident. You can't have 4-foot sidewalks and be able to pass other people, strollers, go in the other direction. So, this idea, and we're actually on 152nd right now, where we're widening all the sidewalks to make this a pedestrian corridor to the light rail station. I guess it's the Overlake train. I'm trying to think which. It's not the technology station, but it's the other one in Overlake. So. I mean, that's the key to it, is a complete streets, bike lanes, making sure we have wide enough paths when we do paths, and sidewalks. So that's how you keep people, and obviously major intersections. That's also where you can put in a refuge island, they call it, refuge island, that lets people have a place to go halfway if they can't make it all the way across in one light. So. And we see that at 148. I'm trying to think, Redmond Way are good examples of that. So.
Great. Oh my gosh, so much. There's so much left to do, and our planning department is doing a great job of bringing forward all the different elements of the Vision Zero. But we really need to make sure we're funding those opportunities and funding studies to ensure that we get the right connections and the right ways to get around, and those opportunities, like we can't pass up the funding opportunities to make sure that these connections are safe and accessible for everyone.
Yeah, well, I was really excited, and it was one of my big pushes to make sure that we could pass that resolution. And the thing with it is that we also need to make sure that there's the actual funding and action on it, not just the planning. So, and actually, one thing a lot of people don't know is that by passing that Vision Zero resolution and committing some funding and building some of these plans, it actually makes our city able to access other funding sources from the state and the federal government to be able to invest in the infrastructure that we need. So it's going to take people who are on the council who are going to be ready to make some of those bold decisions. It's also going to be in making sure that we talk with our community. So we need to make sure that as we design these plans, that we figure out where are the places where people need the most support, and where are some of the places where we have the biggest gaps, and be able to respond and design accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Funding is so critical. What do you think makes a bike route safe for people of all ages and abilities?
Well, it's interesting. It kind of depends on the level of skill. We have different places that people feel comfortable riding, be it the trail system that we have, so completely separate from the car system, or pedestrian systems as well. Also thinking about how do we provide maybe not separated bike lanes, because those are really limited in how much funding we have to put those in our city, but looking at places where we can make sure that people have the right trail maps, the right bike maps, to make sure that they're getting around our city in the safest way possible, and also increase the level of understanding of people outside of bikers, so that the rest of our community understand that there's just different modes going on. So they have to be very aware that there might be people on bikes or pedestrians, or what other forms they are outside of cars, to just bring in a heightened awareness. We've started to look a little bit at speed limits in areas. Some areas are really kind of concerning. I know people, when they're in their cars, they want to get there fast. They also really refocusing on how to get people where they need to be safely. So taking a look at some of those changes as well, to make sure that it's a safe way to go.
The quick answer is a buffer or a separation from traffic. A lot of people don't feel comfortable riding with cars, which makes a lot of sense, and some people do. From a commuter perspective, if you'd like to increase bike commuting, you'll see something like a vegetated buffer, or even 1 to 2 foot lines separating. That's not necessarily enough for most people to feel comfortable. So I'd love to see larger buffer zones on our arterial streets. I'd love to see possibly, I can't remember the name for this, like planted barriers that get put into bike lanes to separate those from vehicle traffic, and overall a more welcoming space for bicycle commuters and other recreational riders.
I believe that a bike route can truly be safe when there's not harm or risk of distracted drivers, turning into that bike route, when there's opportunities for that bike route to be along a trail, and making it an easier access. So working with organizations who are doing incredible work in the region, like East Rail, is going to be critical, so that our bike routes can not only be protected, but also seamless and a lot faster across our region. Because if someone's taking their bike to work, obviously slower than public transit or than a car, but they're also going to have to stop for those lights, have to stop at these intersections. So creating a navigation system that makes that seamless is really critical. I also think that when thinking about safety for all, you have to think about our seniors, have to think about our youth, have to think about who's going to be in these bike lanes. So making them wide enough, not just for one bike, but maybe an intersection of multiple bikes, kids riding with their families. I also think that the protection needs to be there, so that the visibility is not blocked, but that a car or a single occupancy vehicle can't turn into that lane to risk harming those that are using the lane.
Visibility, one, being able to see the cyclists is so important. I would love to start seeing the bike barriers to where it's in a protected lane, because sometimes as drivers, we can veer off because there's so many different distractions along the way. So having that extra layer of protection for all, because then when we're talking about cyclists, then we're also talking about different heights as well. So it's not always going to be at the same height that we're used to seeing. It could be a bit lower too.
Well, so I bicycle occasionally from my house. More often I ride a motorcycle, and actually they're very similar in terms of, obviously you're not riding in the bike lane, but you do have to worry about how your route impacts kind of the doability of a particular trip. So if you're going, you kind of have to plan it out. You have to think, okay, I'm going to take this from here to here, this from here to here, and finally this from there to there, to be able to safely do it. And ideally every route would be safe, but every route is not safe. Some routes have much more traffic and much more in the way of impediments. We've always got construction going on, so those kinds of things. I think riders need to be diligent about planning their route to make sure that they can be safe and to make sure that they're seen. I've seen people without lights at night, with very dark clothing. I think, to me, that's the one thing that people can do as a pedestrian, as a bicyclist, is be visible. Because I know as a motorcyclist, I was almost hit by a car, and boy, it made your heart pound. And I could have been more visible. I've kind of changed how I ride now, but being visible and not wearing dark clothes at night, to me, is the number one thing you can do to make sure that you are safer than you otherwise would be.
I think separated bike paths are really what makes bike routes safer. I'm a cyclist. I ride a road bike and I ride on the street, and it's kind of scary. I'm not gonna lie. There have been many times where I've been cut off and people have zipped around me, all for us to all get at the light at the same time. So we need more education for drivers. We need separated bike lanes so that people of all ages and all abilities can actually feel confident when they go out on their bikes, no matter whether they're going to light rail, going to the bus, just going out for a casual ride. But I think separated bike lanes is the way to go. I will never not think that.
I think that to make bike routes safe, we definitely need to be able to have the bike lanes, if they're on the road, be really clear, the markings. So one of the things that we are now starting to do in a new plan for Redmond is to use this measure of level of transportation stress, LTS, to be able to look at how easy it would be for someone to bike. And there's different levels. So one is like everyone could bike. You would be happy. As a mom, for example, would I feel comfortable having my 4.5-year-old ride on her training wheels in this bike lane? Most of the time, that's if there's going to be some sort of separation from the road. That's where everyone's going to feel comfortable. Then on the next level, is there clear marking? Even if there's not some sort of separation. And then, what a lot of the bike infrastructure we have right now is that it's not particularly clear. So that's a lot of the work that we have ahead of us to do, is to make sure that we have that. And then also investing in some of our trails. One of the things that I'm super excited about is the East Trail, which is going to provide 40 miles of interconnected trails between Pierce all the way up to Snohomish County, and we're going to be one of those connecting pieces. One of our big projects has been to do the last piece of our East Trail, which is the Redmond Central Connector 3 project. And as that finishes, we'll be able to connect you via bike on a trail that's off of the road, right into Kirkland and down into Bellevue and out to all these different neighboring jurisdictions, and connecting up where you can hop onto the East Rail.
9 out of 10 people who work in Redmond don't live here. What role can Redmond play in improving our regional transportation network?
Well, we do a lot of things already. We are very participatory in all of the regional conversations about transportation. So making sure we have investments in Sound Transit and Metro are probably at the top level, are the things that people will see immediately in making sure their transportation choices are good. We also work with a lot of the other entities, including Move Redmond, to make sure that a lot of the businesses know the options that they have, be it Vanpool or Metro or their light rail cards, whatever it might be, to help them get to this area better. we're also, invested in making, not just in the city of Redmond, but throughout our region, and making transportation easier and better for a lot of different people. So we have people that work in Redmond that live, probably an hour radius around our city. And so we're always looking for ways to make sure that we're supporting other investments throughout the region, be it the Highway 18 improvements that are happening, or 405 improvements, the bus rapid transit that we're trying to work on. So we literally take a regional approach, not just a Redmond-centric approach to all of the investments.
The first thing that is on my list is partnerships and making sure that there is representation from our city council and the mayor and staff, working with some of the regional providers. For example, attending their meetings is a simple way for us to become more informed and reporting back to the council so we understand what kinds of issues are in front of us. We typically do see speakers come to the council and let us know what's going on for those organizations and what they need. I would love to see some more coordinated investment for transportation infrastructure throughout the region, and making sure that there's no gaps in networks that are reaching people who need it the most to get to our city. So for example, it's very difficult to get to Redmond from Renton at the moment, which is where a lot of the service workers in our community live and they commute by car, most likely at the moment, to get up to Redmond. So something like a rapid ride line that we're on right now for King County Metro could be something that we would see in the future to get connected up to the link system, to get connected to community transit, any place that they're coming from within the Puget Sound area.
Avenue.
That's a really, shocking statistic when I think about it, because the most important thing for me is for our workers, our family members, our community members to be able to live in the community that they work in. Redmond is just not as accessible as maybe it once was, or as accessible to those that don't make the average median income in this community. And so one thing that I really want to prioritize is looking at our affordable housing options. And with that comes the transit lines, because not everyone can afford to live along the light rail route or even on a bus stop. And so how do we prioritize accessibility to and from these stations? That's going to be critical. I think that when looking at affordable housing, we need to consider all of the options, working with our labor unions, working with our community partners, who's actually being affected when it comes to, folks not being able to live in the community. My own parents, they got priced out of Redmond. My mom is a preschool teacher and my dad's a small business owner. And it's a true reality where we need to prioritize our community members who have to commute hours on end every single day when it comes to, being able to live and thrive in this community. And that comes at a comprehensive plan where transit and housing and, what we're doing with our community partners and organizations will come into play.
This is a tricky question, not a trick question, but a tricky question, because there's so many variables inside of that, especially coming out of COVID. We see whether it's decreased riders, decreased workforce, as in drivers. So being able to push the lever to increase availability, to increase ridership. So I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach from both private and public.
Well, we obviously are doing a lot with light rail currently, and I think that the circulator routes that I talked about to get people to light rail are the best thing we can do. Redmond's a fairly expensive place to live. We're doing our best to incentivize multifamily housing in Redmond. We're building in Redmond in the places where we have the best transit service, both light rail and bus. And frankly, bike paths and pedestrian paths. So I think we're doing about as much as any community in the region is doing to make sure that people can live and work in Redmond. But it is an expensive place because of the high desirability of living close to where you work. And obviously with large employers like Microsoft and Facebook and Amazon, we have a very desirable place to live.
I think we're playing a big role in being super supportive of the light rail, start a line for the light rail, and continuing to be a leader in Vision Zero, continuing to be a leader in safer bike routes. You know, the bill that was just passed at the House level for accessing impact fee funding, that was an initiative started in Redmond and started from our conversations on council. And I asked the question, why can't we use those impact fees? And our staff ran with it, and it turned into a House bill. So it was really incredible that we can now use that funding in a way that's going to bring more accessibility throughout the state.
I think that Redmond is a really important leader in doing this regional work. And honestly, we can't solve our problems around transportation without doing regional collaboration. That's why during my time on council, I've actually served as a representative to the Eastside Transportation Partnership, and I served on the King County Regional Transit Committee. Being able to work collaboratively with neighboring jurisdictions on these issues. One of the issues I've talked about with some of our neighboring cities like Sammamish and Woodinville and Kirkland, who aren't going to be having the light rail coming in, is that we have to think together about how we're going to get people into those stations and do it in a way that we don't just need 1,000 parking spots for everyone to drive their cars there, but that we actually can think about how we jointly advocate to be able to get the bus service that we need, or to be able to get the infrastructure for things like bike, to get people to those stations. And work together on that. And it's been really cool. I've actually worked with quite a few city council members to just do some informal gatherings, as well as we actually recently had a joint meeting with the Sammamish City Council where this was one of the big topics, where our two councils talked together about what does it look like to be planning together and building towards a more sustainable future.
Walkable communities are great for people who want to age in place and multi-generational families. What kinds of housing policy will you support in Redmond 2050 to ensure that we have walkable communities?
So, it's kind of exciting that the work that we're doing to make sure that we're providing different kinds of housing for different people in Redmond. We have invested greatly in the density around the light rail stations throughout our community, Overlake, Marymore, and downtown Redmond. But we're also taking a look at how do we improve the choices, not just in those denser urban cores, but kind of, I guess they call it layer caking out from the city, from the main centers as well. So providing more opportunities for people to be in smaller condominiums or apartments, maybe not the 300 unit buildings, but maybe more on the smaller scale of 20 unit buildings as we move out from downtown and Overlake. But we're also taking a look at how do we provide the different choices throughout our neighborhoods as well. I think probably most of your viewers know that the state passed the middle housing bill that we worked really hard on to make sure it was actually doable in our cities. And so we're looking at opportunities for people to invest in ADUs or duplexes or triplexes or fourplexes and up to sixplexes throughout our whole community, so that we're just providing a lot of different opportunities for people to have housing in Redmond and throughout our region.
Ooh, that's a good question. So one of the things that we've committed to in our comprehensive planning process at the moment at the council level, and this is in collaboration with staff and the mayor as well, is the idea of a 10-minute community. So thinking about development density, making sure that if, as a member of say you live in an apartment complex, you have access to services within the area, like to go get a haircut, to get your groceries, to get the things that you need for your family to be healthy and happy nearby, within walking distance. Give and take if you have to carry a lot. But in terms of housing policies, what that looks like is encouraging different types of development within the same area. I really like the idea of little neighborhood corner stores, which is currently not something that we are allowed to have in some of our neighborhoods. To be able to have if you need to pick up milk at the grocery store and just walk from your house. I love the idea of integrating food, or the work from home community now is relatively large in Redmond as well, and being able to enable those folks to go out to lunch and come back home and sort of have that office nature or office network. There's a lot of different ideas I have. In terms of housing specifically, I'd love to see an increase in our affordability levels to make sure that the housing itself is affordable. I'd love to see an investment in green infrastructure in our housing policy, which will reduce costs, and also focus on promoting wider sidewalks and those kinds of things as part of that process for building housing in the first place. So not only is it a housing crisis, but we want to make sure that we're doing so sustainably and affordably.
Walkable communities are incredibly important to me. I was actually a part of the 2050. There was a listening session where I provided my feedback because I think generational feedback is incredibly important. I grew up in Redmond. I'm actually the only candidate that grew up in the city, and I understand, what it's like to take the bus every single day. I took the bus to the University of Washington when I attended school, and I lived in Redmond. And I actually lived with my grandma at the time, and generationally, it was important for her to be able to use this transit. So I think it's going to be key for us to, when we're forecasting to 2050, explore areas where there's a higher senior population in Redmond. We need to make bus stops a little bit more accessible. When thinking about where we're developing, for example, the Together Center in downtown Redmond. That's going to be a lot of families who are coming in and out of and accessing services. So I talked with the Together Center CEO, and there actually wasn't a transit line across from the station. So I connected them with King County Metro to be able to work along to create a solution. So looking generationally, it's going to be really critical for us to be able to have all of our neighbors access the line, all of our neighbors access not only public transit in the form of the bus or light rail, but have easy options when it comes to shuttles, easy options when it comes to accessing those. If it's an app and seniors can't use the app, one, we might have to get more education, but we might also have to get an alternative if it's just a website that's very simple, if it's translated to different languages. So I really think we need to take a comprehensive approach to looking at accessibility in general.
One of the things that we're working on the Planning Commission right now is the concept of complete neighborhoods and keeping them walkable. So having a convenience store in the neighborhood, having an eatery of some sort, whether that's a coffee shop, sandwich, but having somewhere to go get a bite to eat. But the things that would be resident supporting businesses inside of our neighborhoods.
Right?
Well, I actually had just been talking with both our staff and other people about our policy on condominiums, and really this is a state level issue where currently the liability laws for condominiums are very risky for builders to build those because there's the real chance that they could be sued and it could take their entire company down with it. So, and I'll use myself as an example. My wife and we're ready to downsize, but we have no place to downsize with an ownership situation. So we started at River Trail, which is a condominium property, and then we had brothers living with us. We upsized to a full-size house. Decided not to have kids, and so we didn't really need all that space. But because our property is appreciated, we can't downsize without a huge tax penalty. And so I think it's keeping people in single-family homes longer than they want to necessarily be there, because I don't love the maintenance of keeping up a yard and the various things that go with a full house kind of ownership. But we can't downsize without paying a huge tax penalty, and we're seeing that. I've talked to many people that would love to be able to do the same thing. And so what it means is that families are living in apartments for much longer than they want to, because housing, single-family housing, isn't available for them. So it would really take some pressure off the middle part of the housing market to change those liability laws.
Yeah, so this is also one I'm really excited about. So we've been talking a lot about breaking down barriers from single-family zones to allow small businesses to exist within those single-family zones and to create a more walkable community. So you have, potentially someone that can cut your hair just around the corner, or somewhere you can grab a quick coffee, like within a walking distance. So anything that promotes a community that has more accessibility and more options for services in your community.
So one of the big reasons that I first ran for council 4 years ago and why I'm running again this year is because I care about doing equitable transit-oriented development in our community, and I really feel like Redmond is at the crux of changing from a smaller to a medium-sized city. We're going to be seeing a lot of development and change based on the light rail coming in. And one of the big things that I always talk about is how we have to think about housing and transit hand in hand. And in particular, when we think about housing, we have to be thinking about making housing that is affordable for people for all walks of life to live. So we can't just have people who are able to afford super high income housing live in our communities, because otherwise you have people who are working, in our grocery stores, as our baristas, working as our teachers, who have to commute from other places to actually work in our community. And what's great is that everyone can live where they work so that they don't need to take as much transit. They can walk there. They can get around. Maybe it's just a mile on a scooter, which I'm super excited because Redmond's one of the only jurisdictions doing a Lime scooter share and bike share program. So, but anyway, I think that's been one of my big things, and so I've pushed for us to develop a housing action plan that's really focused on equity and on creating more affordable housing in our jurisdiction, so that way people live near where they work.
Studies have shown that paid parking is one of the most effective ways to promote sustainable transportation options. What kind of parking policies do you support? Things like reducing parking minimums, increasing paid parking, or shared parking lots?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of excited about this. I think this is one of the areas that we are pushing forward on as a city, but we're finding there's definitely some interesting hurdles in just the traditional ways of financing things. So as a city, I'm really looking forward to getting rid of parking minimums. However, in order to get some of those multifamily buildings funded, the banks require a certain amount of parking. So I think there's some areas that we can work with our legislators and banks to help them understand the importance of changing the dynamic around focusing on parking versus focusing on affordability and places for people to be rather than cars. So that's one of the areas. I think the other area that is going to, and as you pointed out, going to be one of the big areas that we're going to deal with in the next few years is paying for parking around our light rail stations and throughout our community. Right now, I think people, they don't necessarily realize that parking is not free. They just don't have to pay for it when they park on the curb. But to a city, it actually comes at an expense. In the buildings that are being built, parking comes as an expense as well. And so we have to work with our entire community to help them understand that if we start taking a look at parking differently, be it needing to pay for street parking or in the buildings themselves, then we'll provide opportunity for a little more turnover for those that do rely on their cars for transportation, if they're senior citizens or have a large family with lots of kids in car seats or whatever it might be. Provide those opportunities there so there's more turnover in the parking situation, and encourage people to maybe take a different choice as well. If they have the opportunity to take the bus down into downtown, then they would do that instead, rather than thinking like, oh, I don't really want to deal with parking right now. But we're a adolescent city growing into an adult city, and that's just one of the challenges that we have before us. But helping the community understand that it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing to think about how do we look at parking differently in the future.
I support all of those things. The first one was a no minimum parking requirement, which makes it actually less costly to build new construction most of the time. I do support that. I also support using parking lots for other purposes than car storage. So you can, for example, construct a affordable housing on some of our parking lots. I believe when we first measured this, how much parking we have in Redmond, like 33% of the city is covered in parking areas. We can use that land for so many different purposes, to build community, to build retail, and really make a really thriving city. The second one was
Increasing paid parking.
Oh, paid parking. Absolutely. I know this is politically sensitive, but I'm an advocate for turnover, especially as a small business manager. I understand the need for people to come and go from the restaurant and cycle, or restaurant or business to cycle customers. It increases customers when you have turnover and parking, rather than having somebody park downtown for the whole day. And the last one was something like curb management, right?
Like shared parking, but
Shared
you can get into curb
Oh, yeah.
management.
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, so curb management is a great idea as well. So making it's the same thing as like turnover practices to make sure that there's safe loading areas for deliveries, while also making sure there's you can get your Uber Eats or your Grubhub food in a timely manner where they can park safely and do that service for you. I think it's really important to have sort of a broad idea or openness to understanding how transportation is really changing in our cities, especially as our city is changing and growing so quickly. So we need to be able to be flexible and nimble about that. And the other one was shared parking.
Yes.
Okay. Shared parking in this context means
Like having parking lots that could share space, so the parking isn't just only for one restaurant or one place.
Like a streetery?
Could be streetery,
Okay.
kind of open-ended.
Oh wow! So there's public right of way has so much potential. I love that we've had the use of shared spaces or basically using parking spots for different purposes that provide a public benefit, such as being able to go eat in this lovely weather that we're having right now in Redmond with your family outside at a restaurant in the downtown area. That's fabulous. I think it's a really creative way to use space. Pocket parking, little parks, those kinds of things can really energize the city and make it so it's a much more enjoyable experience to go downtown or go down to the Bellevue area and just be part of the community.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think reducing parking minimums will absolutely help across our region, just in thinking about the developments and having the long-term sustainability where we can focus more on our public transit options. We can focus more on, when it comes to light rail coming on the east side, how do we actually have more solutions nearby that are transit oriented in terms of development, and that can really be geared around that light rail station. I also think that looking at paid parking is going to be critical across Redmond or across the east side, specifically in certain areas. I don't ever want to mitigate anyone from being able to come into Redmond or come into the east side to be able to enjoy what we have to offer. But I also know that when it comes to communities who are using public transit and really pushing for more use of our buses and our systems there, it's going to be really important for us to create opportunities where single occupancy vehicles are not relied upon, but rather just another option where if people want to pay, they can do so. But it's really going to come down to making our bus routes and bus stops a lot more accessible, more timely, at hours that folks can actually use them, whether it's 6 in the morning, whether it's 10 at night, and any time through the workday. We really have to prioritize those routes so that the paid parking or parking in general does not become a factor of people wanting to just use a single occupancy vehicle.
Parking is such a hot topic right now, whether it be coming into high density urban developed areas or the parking for the housing in these areas as well. And how do we do it in an equitable way to where you are able to come and park and save while having that piece of revenue as well. And then promoting mass transit in the same. So looking at how do we do that in such a way that is going to be equitable, and that's one that we're still exploring.
Great.
So the city has already done some of this in developments that we see downtown, and we're actually seeing people decide not to buy cars to use transit. And then sometimes they rent cars when they need, to do a trip that really requires a vehicle. So the first part of that, you mentioned, could you proceed with that?
Paid parking is an effective way to promote sustainable transportation options.
So we actually have instituted limits on parking. We have a paid parking lot in downtown Redmond, right next to Half Price Books. Which gives people the opportunity to be able to park, shop, walk around, but still I think it's a 2 or 3 hour limit, but it is paid, and so I actually support us doing even private paid parking, within buildings, regular lots, And right now, that's the policy we don't have. We don't allow anybody but the city to do it, which I think is, at the time I said I don't like that we're restricting only to the city having a paid parking lot. Anybody that has a parking lot that wants to rent it should be available to do it, and let the market determine what the price is.
So parking is one that we've lightly studied on council so far, and one that I need to educate myself on a lot more. We're growing from a small community that's not used to having to pay for parking into a city that we're really going to have to study this and look at it heavily. So I need to educate myself a bit more on that topic. But I know that it's a growing pain that our community is going to have to really heavily consider, and I just need to do more research on it.
Those are all great ideas. I think for parking, we did, as a city of Redmond, a study, especially in downtown, to be able to look at our parking and figure out what are some of the things that we could do to be able to create more turnover and be able to use our parking more effectively. And one of those pieces was actually going to be around paid parking, as well as having different time requirements. And I think that's one of the big pieces, as well as when we do look at, what are those parking requirements for housing. That's also part of the discussion around affordability as well. So I think all those pieces have to come together. And then the other piece is, if you actually want people to park less, you have to make it easier for them to get to our downtown corridors or our urban centers without using cars. So then you have less need for parking as well.
What kinds of projects would you want to see funded with additional revenue from the Transportation Benefit District? This year, Redmond City Council passed a Transportation Benefit District. This small increase in sales tax will ensure that money funded goes to support the maintenance of our roads and sidewalks and improving transportation projects in our transportation improvement program.
Well, a few of the areas that I think that we are really excited about, improvements to our sidewalks and biking. We have a lot of challenges in those areas, from just age and tree lifting and just investments we haven't been able to make. So making sure our bike lanes are free and clear and safe. So be it adding a little bit of a barrier or something like that throughout our community. Sidewalks themselves, making sure that they're easily accessible and flatter and in good condition, will be really exciting to make those investments as well. And then just general street improvements, making sure that we're keeping our asphalt up to the right grade to make sure it lasts into the future is I'm excited about that. The money won't go as far as we want it to, but I know we're going to make a huge dent in some of our projects that we have in our plans.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. The TBD, this is just sort of a quick summary. So council has passed a transportation benefit district sales tax increase that helps us fund our transportation improvement plan. So the types of projects specifically I'd like to see are, number one, gap completion. If there are gaps in our network anywhere, which means the sidewalk to nowhere, if you've got one of those in your area, would love to see that completed so that there's safe access throughout your corridor or your neighborhood. We're doing a lot of that good work now with their new development areas, but in terms of older areas within the city, we sometimes need to reprioritize that connection to make sure that there is a full sidewalk on both sides of the street and access for everybody in those neighborhoods. So that's super important. Walking, you should be able to walk where you live. Next is bike lanes, biking improvements, and making sure there's no gaps in that. I would say there's probably some maintenance to be done on our sidewalks. One of the things I've been watching since I've been on the council has been our ADA improvements plan throughout the city. The cost of improving all of the sidewalks in the cities to make it more wheelchair accessible, just as an example, it's not just wheelchair accessibility, it's any type of person who walks, bikes, or rolls. You don't want to trip on the sidewalk. If you're riding a scooter, you don't want to hit a big bump on the sidewalk. If you're in a wheelchair, you have even more concern for your health and well-being than most. So it's important that we make sure our ADA improvement plan is actionable and invested in as a priority. So I'd say that's probably, if I have to repeat myself and put that in a different order, I'd say we should fund our ADA improvement plan as a priority, and then also the pedestrian improvements, which kind of goes hand in hand with that.
So I really support the idea of the Transportation Benefit District. I really think it makes the City Council show to the community that transit and transportation is very critical for our community. Some projects that I would love to see, funded through this benefit district would be more accessibility to these bus stops. And when we're thinking about where they're placed, we really have to think about where our workers are heading, where we're focusing on, our families, how we can make that accessible. I know King County just passed the free youth fare, so anyone under 18 can ride those bus routes for free. And when we're thinking about how our youth are accessing these bus lines, where they're actually going, we really need to make that investment into those opportunities for generational accessibility. I also think I would really want to look more at transit-oriented development. I know that we're building a lot along the corridor of the light rail in Redmond, but when it comes to that last mile, really investing in maybe shuttles, partnering with King County Metro and regional groups like Move Redmond in order to make that a reality of working together to get to the light rail station, get to our bus stops, and really create that holistic approach. And finally, I would really love to use the funding of the benefit district to look at those protected bike lanes, looking across the city, because mobility is not just single occupancy vehicles, it's not just our public transit, it's not just walking, it's everything in between, rolling, working on our bicycle routes. And so I think investing in that so that all of our residents feel empowered to be able to use these routes is going to be really, really important.
Great.
With the additional revenue from this benefit, I think that it's great that we're putting the money and we've got surplus to go into things that are more innovative and really pushing us forward. And I think that there are times also where we need to take a look at and what already exists. Are there? We've got several spots in the downtown area that I'm most familiar with, as that's my neighborhood, where it's very difficult to walk across because of routes that are coming up and buckling the sidewalk because of crosswalks. I've seen several of various abled community members in motorized wheelchairs or standard or with white canes having a difficult time with a lot of the curbs that are downtown. So while we're being innovative and we are pushing forward, taking some of the extra surplus and looking at, okay, where can we go back and get back to basics in some areas?
Well, we have about $250 million in transportation needs, so there's no shortage of things to be done, but certainly maintenance is high amongst them, because the more the better you're able to maintain it, the less often you have to replace it. And in fact, if you let it get to a point where it goes too long, you end up having to replace something that, if you maintain it properly, you wouldn't be in that. And the price tag is just so much higher when you have to replace something, because you have to go so much further down. You have to rebuild the base of the road versus just putting new asphalt, grinding and replacing the asphalt that's there. So to me, we have no shortage of projects, transportation projects that need to be done. So I don't have any doubt that we will effectively be able to allocate those dollars in maintenance and replacement of infrastructure that we really have drastic needs right now.
Ooh, so I think the goal that council had for the Transportation Benefit District that I'm supportive of is really building up our bike infrastructure and using that money to have safer options for bike routes, but to also make sure that our roads are in good condition so that everyone can get around safely, no matter what your mode of choice is to get around.
Yeah, so I was really glad to be able to establish Redmond's first transportation benefit district and vote for that. One of the main goals that we first set up with the Transportation Benefit District is actually not particularly sexy, but definitely very important, which is to make sure that our pavement across the city is managed well. So that way you're not seeing potholes and our streets are being well cared for. This is important not only for cars, but also for those who are trying to bike or get around, even those who are trying to get around in other types of accessible modes of transportation like wheelchairs. So I think definitely that's our first priority, is making sure that our streets are at high quality, because we did a study and found that we definitely have a lot of needs there. I think what's cool about creating a transportation benefit district, though, is that it creates this new funding source where we could in the future be able to fund different types of projects. So like one of the types of projects that I think would be really important with the light rail coming in and that I've been pushing on is for us to provide some sort of flexible transit service to solve our first last mile transportation issues, to be able to get people from neighborhoods down into where our transit centers are, to be able to connect into mass transit. I think probably the way that we're going to do that is to be able to collaborate with King County Metro to be able to offer some sort of service that where people could be able to go from where near they live to be able to go to some point near a transit stop. And probably in order to do it, we're going to have to pitch in the money. So I think that could be a really exciting way to be able to use some funding from the Transportation Benefit District. When I talk with people in the community, that's probably one of the most popular things, is just to be able to have that.
So this year, America Walks is hosting a National Week Without Driving Challenge. It encourages elected leaders and decision makers from around the country to try getting around without driving for 1 week between October 2nd and October 8th. Will you be participating? Why or why not?
I will take a look at that. I hope I will be participating, but sometimes it has to do with where some of my meetings are. If I have a meeting down in Renton middle of the day, it makes it a little challenging for me to get there and back, because as you know very well, the routes to Renton are not very good from Redmond, which is unfortunate. But I will be excited to take a look at that as my meetings are in person more and more. I'm looking forward to taking it into downtown Seattle again and giving up the car and just not dealing with the parking and all of the traffic and everything. So I'm excited to think about that. I'll figure out how it works in my schedule. That'll be great.
Yeah.
Would love to participate, and this week has actually been a great practice because we've had 2 flat tires in our house, and so we're down to a 1-car family for the week. So it's been kind of an adventure. I actually do a lot of work from home, so I am not tied to one vehicle or a vehicle at all. And I think last year I participated by accident. So I didn't have anywhere to go that week, and so I'm willing, and that's kind of the plan that I have, is to wait and see on how that will go.
Yes, I will be participating in this week of walking, where it's really important for us to be able to get around in a more sustainable way without using our vehicles. I am very blessed and fortunate to have the opportunity to live in an area where a grocery store is accessible to me, where I can, get some coffee at a coffee shop. But I know that that's not the reality for everyone. So making sure that our city has the opportunity, where we're growing into this community, that every resident has that opportunity to be able to participate in the, in a equitable way, is going to be really important for me moving forward. But I'm really excited about this. I actually lived in New York for 1 year of my life, so everything was within walking distance there.
I will be participating in this challenge for a number of reasons. I mean, of course, I'll understand decreased mobility based on my own lived experience, and that being a single mom working in Bellevue, living in Redmond. My son is 16 and he plays sports in school. However, he doesn't drive either, and bus is going to where he needs to be at the times, then that's difficult. So while I have that experience that I can already speak to as to what makes it difficult should I not be able to have a car, then what I don't have is the experience of, but what if I had a varying ability? How would that impact it? And then I get to use that week to think about it from that perspective instead of my regular lived experience.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on my own personal health situation. So I have a problem with my foot at the moment. Don't know if it'll be ready to go by then, but I would certainly love to. And when it's been available, I've tried to get to council on my bike. I have a particularly steep hill, which makes it a little bit more challenging, but and sometimes I'm not as prompt as I need to be to council. So getting in the car is necessary, but I would love to be able to do that. I don't live that far from City Hall, but again, it's with some of the things that we have to do. Like we have a situation where we have a meeting, and then we have a break for dinner. And so what do you do? And there are walking alternatives there, but we go to sometimes 10 o'clock. And walking down the river trail at 10 o'clock is, not necessarily the best idea. But not that it's not safe, but it's not well lit. So anyway, I'd love to. Depends on how my foot is, I guess.
Definitely. I have participated every year that I've been an elected official, so yes, I will be participating again. It's every year I've learned something new. So my first year I was actually on a road trip with some friends, and normally I'm the driver, and it was really kind of a different experience to not be that person and to have to rely on other people to be the driver. And this past year, I found it really interesting because I learned that it's quicker for me to get to Kirkland City Hall than it is to get to Redmond City Hall. So I ended up attending our meetings remotely that week, just so that timing could work out for everything, and attended some meetings with some other local elected officials, and we all met up in Kirkland because it was just the most convenient for everyone. So we've got some work to do in Redmond to make us more accessible to everyone.
I will be participating, although I do want to note that I probably will rely a little bit on my husband, who will end up doing some of the driving, because I do have 2 young children, and I think I'm going to try to be able to take them around using the bus, and we also have a seat on the back of our bikes to be able to take them. But for a lot of families, it is challenging to be able to get around without a car. But I think what's so cool about the challenge is that you really do get the chance to be able to think about what does it look like if we really were going to go completely without driving. But I can't say, I feel like the one caveat I'll probably give is that there may be a day or two where my husband might drive our kids to school.
That's totally within the framework of the challenge. You're allowed to have somebody else drive you. You're just not allowed to be the one driving. So that's not cheating. So that's the end of our set questions. Is there anything else that you want to share with us, or other kind of platform issues that you want to focus on?
Well, mostly thanks for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this. I think it's really exciting where Redmond is not just in the local region, but the state, thinking about the advancements that we've made as a city, as a community. We used to be just so car-centric, and we're really making great strides in moving forward to having 4 light rail stations, as I tell people over and over again, better access to transit, the last mile improvements that we made. I think that as a city, we're really trying to shine a big light on the advancements that communities can make if they put their financial investments in making it easier for people to get around in a lot of different modes. So pretty excited about it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think as part of my platform, sustainable transportation is the heart and soul of a city, especially when it comes to things that your tax dollars can do and invest in infrastructure. We often take infrastructure for granted, and it's super important. It ties into everything that we have in the city. It is your asset as the community, and sustainability is a really important piece of that. What I mean by sustainability is environmental sustainability. So I'm really looking forward to thinking more broadly about our carbon footprint, what that looks like when we actually construct the city, and also tie that into how we work with our builders and thinking about green building. As part of the work that I've done on council, we committed to a climate emergency declaration, which set some pretty clear and aggressive goals to meet by 2030. including pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure as part of that, which is not the only solution, but transit is a big piece of this as well. Preparing the city for light rail, that's going to change everything. It's going to get really busy in certain places in the city, and we'll see people's behaviors change around how they get around. So I'm super curious about how that's going to look. Our city is changing, the demographics are changing, and very exciting all around, but a huge focus on climate change and what those impacts really mean for us so that we can mitigate those impacts going forward.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you
really
so much.
enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So my platform is really community focused. I want to get to know every single neighbor in Redmond. I want to make sure that I'm doing the work to be able to represent every single resident. So already we've knocked on nearly 5,000 doors. We've gone on community engagement campaigns where I like to listen to what residents are saying, meeting with local organizations, nonprofits, small businesses, to really be able to articulate to the rest of the community and at City Council what the residents really want to see from the city. I've heard many things, many people unfortunately being priced out, a lot of seniors, a lot of families not being able to afford living in Redmond. So one of my top priorities is just making this community accessible for every single resident, whether or not they grew up here, whether they immigrated here, or whether they just want to live long-term in Redmond. I think I want to make this community one that everyone can thrive in. I know I've been very fortunate to have grown up in Redmond, living on Avondale Road, now living in Southeast Redmond. I think the city has so much to offer, and I'm very, very honored to have the opportunity to not just interview with Move Redmond, but really be within this campaign, engaging with community, and hopefully serving for several years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm loving just how the push and the support that we've got around mass transit. I love that we are looking at younger riders, and with the youth program that we have for Orca cards for youth and that youth right, so that they get into that habit and they see how easy transit can be. And if it's not so easy, then they can start creating their lives around it instead of being car dependent and then making the transition later in life, rather than it's a bonus than when you get to drive a car rather than the norm.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I'll look forward to seeing you in community.
All right, thank you so much, Angie.
Well, thanks for doing these interviews. I think when transit is easy for people to do, they will do it, and like I said, I've done it many times. I used to every day go to work via the bus, via the 545, and I'm really excited about being able to get to the airport, to get to a Mariners game from basically from a few blocks from my house. And the idea that we get these circulator buses that connect neighborhoods to the light rail, I look at it as kind of a hub and spoke thing, where the spokes reach out to the neighborhood, collect people, and obviously bring them back. But the easier we make it, the more likely people are going to find it to be convenient and decide to get that their car is something they can leave at home or at the park and ride, and feel better actually about doing it. I know that I do when I take the bus into Seattle. I'd rather have my car on the east side and not have to worry about it. The parking hassles, the potential for it to be broken into, which has actually happened to me. So I think it's great. I think if it's convenient, we'll make it. People will clamor to ride the bus or light rail, and I'm particularly looking forward to light rail opening.
So we recently had some folks go to NACTO conference in Denver, and we are going to be working on a letter to the National Transportation Safety Board about the size of vehicles and how unsafe the size of vehicles are. And if there are any community members that want to get involved in helping with that effort, that would be incredible to have your voices heard. There's so much in this whole realm that we can do to encourage safer transportation options, safer cars, and just making sure that people's voices are being heard, and that this is something that we all experience every day, but we don't necessarily advocate for every day. So if you're interested in getting involved, reach out to council members, send us information, reach out to the different campaigns, and reach out to Move Redmond because they're pretty awesome at this work.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share all my thoughts on transit. It's definitely been one of my main areas that I focused on city council, and I think one of the reasons why I feel like this year's municipal elections are so important is because the people who are on our council in the upcoming 4 years are going to make some really big decisions, especially around Redmond 2050, in terms of how our community grows and changes, and whether we can grow in a way that is sustainable, inclusive, and equitable, whether people can live near where they work, regardless of what their income is, whether people are going to be able to get around and the light rail is going to be a real success in our community, and whether we can make it a safer place to be able to do different types of multimodal transit. So I just encourage everyone who is voting this year to make sure to go all the way down the ballot, really pay attention to where people stand, and know that I'm working currently and will continue working to be able to make sure that Redmond is a place where it's a great place to get around and a great place to live.
Great, thank you so much.